Some American retirees are finding the good life by going global. Seth Doane introduces us to a few of them.
Look closely at the expression of profound relief on the faces of expats who have moved abroad. What you are seeing is not just a vacation snapshot, it is the visual evidence of a massive structural escape from a system where wellness has been over-commercialized and priced out of reach for ordinary citizens. This stark contrast is no longer an isolated phenomenon or a mere eccentric lifestyle trend. Over the past decade, a staggering 5 million American citizens, predominantly from the hardworking baby boomer generation, have quietly packed their lives into suitcases, surrendered their domestic zip codes, and walked away from the United States. This is a monumental exodus occurring without a single protest banner, political slogan, or act of public unrest. It is an orderly, silent migration driven by a chilling realization the historic social contract that once guaranteed a stable, dignified old age in exchange for a lifetime of labor has fundamentally collapsed. When a dominant economic superpower evolves to a point where its senior citizens must effectively export their old age to developing nations just to maintain basic human dignity, it triggers a profound systemic contraction. It forces us to confront a vital, deeply unsettling question. Why has the American dream become a hollow brand that can only be successfully lived when manufactured and experienced elsewhere? If the very people who built the infrastructure of the nation are fleeing its shores today, who will be next to vote with their feet? To truly comprehend the scale of this macroeconomic shift, we must look beneath the surface of the Standard Consumer Price Index and examine the brutal mathematical reality confronting the average aging American. The average retiree in the United States now spends over $56,000 per year just to maintain a baseline existence. To put that into perspective, that figure is nearly identical to the median annual income of a full-time worker who is actively trading 40 hours of their life every single week for a paycheck. This structural mismatch has plunged millions of senior citizens into what economists call a blind recession, a devastating economic state where individuals who have worked diligently for 40 or 50 years find their accumulated lifetime savings completely neutralized by aggressive asset, inflation, and currency devaluation. When the historic post-war social contract was originally established, the federal Social Security program was envisioned as a robust safety net designed to guarantee absolute peace of mind. However, under the heavy weight of modern financialized capitalism, that promise has been systematically eroded. The average Social Security check brings in roughly $1,900 per month. Yet, when confronted with a median monthly rent that breaches $2,200 in states like Florida or $2,800 in California, the math instantly breaks. Before a retiree even buys a single loaf of bread, pours a gallon of gas, or pays a single utility bill, their entire lifetime guaranteed safety net is completely wiped out, reduced to a negative balance. This is not a failure of personal budgeting. It is a profound structural decay. The capitalistic machine has optimized every sector for corporate efficiency and maximum shareholder yield, converting basic human necessities like shelter and wellness into speculative financial assets. But as terrifying as these numbers are, they pale in comparison to a dark, hidden development brewing behind closed doors in Washington. Federal investigators and central bank analysts have quietly realized that this 5 million person exodus is doing something catastrophic to the domestic financial architecture. A hidden regulatory trigger is about to be pulled, one that will shock every single citizen currently planning to retire within the next 10 years. If you think you can simply buy a plane ticket and escape to a cheaper country when the bills get too high, you are in for a devastating awakening. Because the government has just realized a terrifying truth about where all those retirement billions are actually going, and their next classified move will completely trap you inside the system forever. The terrifying truth behind the 5 million person exodus lies in a severe economic concept known as institutional capital flight. When millions of retirees migrate, they do not just take their luggage, they permanently withdraw hundreds of billions of dollars from the domestic banking architecture. Every single Social Security direct deposit, every private pension transfer, and every liquidated retirement account represents a structural drain of liquidity from the American financial system. The regulatory apparatus is waking up to a devastating realization. This is an uncontrollable, permanent capital strike that threatens the foundational tax base and the velocity of money within the domestic economy. As a direct response, an invisible net of aggressive cross-border financial surveillance and complex compliance frameworks is quietly tightening, turning the dream of a simple international escape into a financial minefield. This institutional tightening highlights the core failure of the domestic system, driven by two predatory mechanisms of modern American life: the absolute monopoly of the corporate healthcare complex and the relentless escalation of property taxes. Senior citizens are discovering that the concept of true ownership in the United States has become a legal illusion. Even if an individual spends 30 years fully paying off their mortgage, they never truly own their home. Instead, they are subjected to an escalating property tax, a financial mechanism that functions as a perpetual lifetime rent paid directly to the state. It is a monthly ransom paid just to maintain the right to exist in the very house they built with their own labor. When an economic system transforms the sanctuary of old age into a perpetual debt obligation, it ceases to be a functional society and instead becomes a hyper-financialized trap. Simultaneously, the hyperinflation of the pharmaceutical and medical industrial complexes creates a world where a single cardiovascular prescription can equal the cost of a round-trip plane ticket to Lisbon, and a standard overnight hospital bill matches a year of rent overlooking the sea in Southeast Asia. This extreme disparity forces an unnatural survival choice. In America, every pill is counted against a dwindling bank balance. Abroad, the cost of wellness drops by up to 70%, transforming medical care from a terrifying corporate transaction back into a fundamental human service. This structural failure feeds directly into a broader, deeply psychological crisis, a profound trust recession. While domestic media outlets frequently depict developing destinations as unstable, the Global Peace Index paints a radically different, objective picture, ranking the United States at a dismal 163rd out of 193 countries in terms of safety. True peace of mind cannot be manufactured by corporate security industries. In major American suburban centers, safety has been reduced to an artificial commodity defined by triple locked doors, high-definition 4K surveillance cameras, and gated perimeters that breed profound social isolation. You live in a beautiful asset, but you do not dare step out onto your own balcony after dark. Abroad, in the quiet towns of Malta, Portugal, or Thailand, American expats are discovering a completely different paradigm where security is built on the unquantifiable strength of human community rather than police presence or digital surveillance. It is the profound relief of leaving a front door unlocked while walking to the morning market, or having a neighbor genuinely check on your well-being without an invoice attached. The tragic irony is that to find the foundational values of trust, safety, and mutual respect, the very elements that were once promised as the bedrock of the American dream, citizens are now forced to cross oceans and alter their entire identities. The economic tectonic shifts radiating from the American retirement crisis manifest most visibly in the brutal restructuring of the domestic low-wage labor market. For a significant portion of the aging population, specifically more than 1/3 of American citizens over the age of 60, the traditional concept of a work-free retirement has completely evaporated. These individuals are not re-entering the workforce out of a desire for intellectual stimulation or social engagement. They are forced back into the machinery of hypercapitalism by sheer material necessity. They form a new, vulnerable class within the service economy, the elderly precariat. Across the United States, senior citizens are increasingly filling roles as big box retail greeters, nighttime security guards, fast food cashiers, and rideshare drivers, transforming what should be a period of dignified rest into a prolonged struggle for basic survival. This phenomenon represents a deep commodification of old age. When an economic system forces a 70-year-old grandmother to stand for an 8-hour shift on a concrete floor just to offset the rising cost of her supplementary health insurance, the social fabric is experiencing a profound systemic failure. The microeconomic choices forced upon this demographic are devastatingly binary. Every single month, millions of elderly Americans are trapped in a zero-sum calculation, deciding whether to allocate their finite, inflation-eroded funds toward life-sustaining pharmaceuticals or nutritional sustenance. This is the hidden underbelly of the modern domestic economy. a world where a spike in the price of eggs or a utility rate hike can instantly trigger a medical emergency because an individual can no longer afford both food and insulin. By exporting their old age to international destinations, the 5 million expats who left are explicitly refusing to participate in this cruel economic lottery, recognizing that their remaining years possess a value that cannot be measured by a corporate time card. Beyond the immediate financial metrics, the departure of 5 million affluent and middle-class retirees inflicts a severe, irreversible wound on the structural integrity of American social capital. Social capital, the invisible network of trust, shared institutional knowledge, volunteerism, and communal cohesion is the foundational bedrock that keeps a society from fracturing. The baby boomer generation, throughout its lifetime, accumulated an immense repository of intellectual, cultural, and operational expertise. When millions of these individuals systematically exit the country, they create a massive social vacuum. Historically, retired citizens formed the core pillar of civil society in the United States, serving as the primary labor force for local nonprofit organizations, community food banks, public libraries, and civic mentorship programs. The mass migration of this demographic leaves domestic community structures deeply hollowed out, starved of the vital human capital required to maintain localized safety nets. The American family structure is experiencing an artificial geographic amputation, driven not by choice, but by the financial impossibility of proximity. Simultaneously, this exodus fundamentally disrupts the traditional mechanism of intergenerational wealth transfer and familial support structures. In a healthy societal framework, grandparents function as a critical cushion for the nuclear family, providing non-commodified childcare, emotional stability, and historical continuity. When skyrocketing domestic costs force grandparents to relocate 10,000 miles away to Southeast Asia or Latin America, the immediate family unit experiences a sharp rupture. Younger generations are suddenly stripped of this vital support system, forcing them to turn to expensive, commercialized corporate childcare alternatives, which further exacerbates the systemic debt cycle of the modern workforce. Furthermore, the capital that these retirees accumulated over decades, money that would historically be reinvested into local economies or passed down to stabilize the financial futures of their children, is now permanently diverted into foreign real estate, international healthcare networks, and overseas consumer markets. The United States is effectively experiencing a massive, silent brain drain and a wealth drain wrapped into one, leaving behind an increasingly isolated, financially strained younger population to bear the massive tax burdens of a rapidly aging, decaying infrastructure. The massive relocation of 5 million American retirees represents a significant geopolitical and macroeconomic realignment that extends far beyond the borders of the United States. In the theater of global economic competition, this movement constitutes a massive, uncoerced transfer of sovereign wealth from a Western superpower to agile, emerging economies. Major destinations across Southern Europe and Southeast Asia, including Portugal, Malta, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, have strategically engineered their immigration frameworks to function as capital collectors, capturing the floating liquidity of the American middle class. Through the implementation of specialized programs, such as Thailand's 10-year long-term resident visa or Portugal's structural residency paths, these recipient nations are aggressively bidding for a piece of the American retirement pie. For these host nations, welcoming an influx of American retirees is a deliberate macroeconomic strategy. An individual who arrives with a guaranteed passive income of $40,000 or $80,000 per year, completely funded by foreign entities like the United States Social Security Administration or private Western pension funds, represents a pure injection of external capital. This demographic requires zero domestic employment creation, yet they continuously stimulate local service industries, private healthcare sectors, and real estate markets. From a geopolitical standpoint, the United States is effectively subsidizing the consumer economies of its global competitors and partners alike. While the American domestic infrastructure groans under the weight of escalating national debt and a strained safety net, these new oases of welfare are actively utilizing American capital to modernize their own urban centers, expand their private medical facilities, and build robust, service-driven economic structures that thrive on the purchasing power of the United States dollar. However, this unprecedented global migration pattern is a double-edged sword, unleashing a disruptive macroeconomic phenomenon known as the gentry expats effect, When millions of relatively wealthy individuals from a high-income superpower descend upon developing or lower-cost economies, they fundamentally disrupt the localized equilibrium of supply and demand. Armed with strong currency and substantial lifetime accumulations, American retirees possess a level of purchasing power that drastically outclasses the economic capabilities of the native population. This massive disparity triggers an aggressive export of inflation, rapidly driving up the baseline cost of living in once affordable international enclaves. When the wealth of one nation escapes its domestic boundaries, it inevitably rewrites the economic reality of the territory where it lands. The consequences of this capital influx are felt most acutely in localized real estate markets and essential services. In cultural and geographic hotspots, from the historic neighborhoods of Lisbon to the mountainous regions of Chiang Mai, property values and rental rates have experienced sharp exponential increases, frequently doubling or tripling within less than a decade. Prime residential zones are systematically converted into high-end expat developments, effectively pricing out the local working class and younger native generations from their own ancestral territories. This economic displacement is further compounded by the commercialization of basic necessities. Medical clinics and retail establishments shift their focus toward catering to high-spending foreigners, leading to a dual-tiered economic structure. While American retirees celebrate their newfound ability to live on half the cost of their domestic requirements, native populations in the recipient countries find themselves squeezed by the very same forces of inflation that force the Americans to flee. This dynamic introduces a complex layer of geopolitical friction, transforming the welcoming embrace of host nations into a tense domestic debate regarding the preservation of national sovereignty and economic accessibility for their own citizens. The decision of 5 million retirees to permanently relocate abroad should not be misconstrued as a temporary trend or a simple act of geographical escapism. On a deeper macroeconomic level, this massive migration pattern represents a highly sophisticated long-term strategy of systemic self-defense. For decades, the dominant Western capitalistic model has conditioned its citizenry to equate human worth almost exclusively with economic productivity and output. This intense focus birthed a pervasive cultural condition known as productivity sickness, a toxic cycle where individuals operate under constant hyper-performance only to face structural isolation once they exit the labor pool. By rerouting their capital and physical presence to international jurisdictions, these aging citizens are pioneering a profound behavioral shift. They are systematically decoupling their personal well-being from the domestic state, consciously trading a hyper-financialized, high-stress domestic environment for a decelerated, authentic existence where time is measured as life itself rather than as a monetary unit. While this structural decoupling signals a severe crisis of trust for the domestic system, it simultaneously opens up a massive, unprecedented frontier of hidden economic opportunities on a global scale. The international rerouting of this silver tsunami is triggering an immense boom in multi-jurisdictional financial architecture. Forward-thinking global banking institutions and fintech platforms are rapidly scaling up complex asset management systems, transnational portable insurance products, and cross-border wealth protection mechanisms specifically engineered to handle the intricate tax liabilities and currency fluctuations of a highly mobile expatriate class. Furthermore, this migration is driving an absolute renaissance in the development of international medical infrastructure and specialized real estate sectors within the host nations. Visionary private equity funds and corporate healthcare networks are aggressively investing billions of dollars into state-of-the-art medical campuses, integrated retirement villages, and premium assisted living facilities across Latin America and Southeast Asia. These developments deliver world-class, Western standard medical care at a mere 30 or 40% of the domestic cost, creating a high-yield, recession-proof asset class that permanently shifts investment capital away from unstable domestic financial products into tangible, thriving international hubs of human welfare. The silent departure of 5 million American retirees over the past decade marks the final stage of a profound macroeconomic feedback loop, a spiritual divorce between a nation and its citizens. This is not a standard story of migration. It is a systematic unwinding of the historic social contract. When individuals work for 40 or 50 years, fully complying with every structural obligation of the state, only to find that their final years are treated by the system as a mere budget burden figure, the foundation of national loyalty fractures. This mass exit acts as a definitive warning sign for the domestic economy, signaling a chronic erosion of internal resilience and social capital. It exposes a bitter paradox. The great economic cogs that generate massive wealth have ultimately failed at the critical task of preserving human dignity after an individual's economic productivity ceases. This mass migration represents the physical manifestation of the American dream being permanently unbundled and shipped overseas. The core values of personal freedom, socioeconomic opportunity, and authentic community are no longer tied to a specific domestic zip code. Instead, they have been converted into an international commodity, enjoyed on the shores of Portugal, the mountains of Thailand, or the coastal enclaves of Mexico. The 5 million who left did not lose faith in the original ideals of their homeland. They simply recognized that to save the dream, they had to cross oceans before the domestic financial net trapped them entirely. They voted with their feet, transforming their retirement checks into passports and rewriting the global geography of wealth. When an empire begins to systematically export its own elders, it does not just lose capital, it drops its anchor of historical continuity and communal trust. The system left behind continues to run at maximum speed, hyper-optimized for corporate efficiency, yet increasingly devoid of the human fabric that once gave it purpose. Can a nation truly maintain its status as an advanced superpower when the very citizens who built its foundation feel they must abandon their homes just to be seen, heard, and cared for in old age? Is the modern economic machine working for us? Or have we simply become disposable operators of a system that has forgotten how to be human? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this investigative analysis thought-provoking and wish to explore the hidden macroeconomic currents shaping our world, please hit the like button and subscribe for more fact-based global analysis.